In a modest home in Virginia Beach, among thousands of documented readings and personal notes, a collection of private journals belonging to Edgar Cayce was discovered sealed in a wooden box. These journals, never before shared with the public, contain Cayce's most intimate reflections on the profound interplay between masculine and feminine energies. What you are about to hear are the transcribed contents of these personal manuscripts, revealing Cayce's deepest insights into how the feminine essence serves as the catalyst for masculine spiritual awakening. These words come directly from the man known as the Sleeping Prophet, whose consciousness seemingly traversed dimensions while his body remained in trance. The feminine energy, Cayce wrote in his first entry dated April 14, 1923, is not merely a counterpart to the masculine, but rather the divine key that unlocks chambers within the male soul that would otherwise remain forever sealed. He continued with a revelation that startled even himself. Today, while in meditation, I was shown how each man carries within him the imprint of every woman who has touched his life. Mother, lover, friend, stranger, each leaving an energetic signature that either awakens or subdues different aspects of his spiritual nature. In these pages, Edgar Cayce documented observations that went beyond his famous readings. These were his personal contemplations, explorations that he conducted in the quietude of his consciousness, seeking to understand the mystical dance between the divine masculine and feminine that he witnessed repeatedly in the Akashic records. May 28, 1923. I have come to understand that what we call the feminine energy exists as a distinct vibrational pattern in the universe, Cayce noted. It is not bound to gender as we understand it in physical form, though it expresses itself most naturally through the female vessel. This energy carries the resonance of the Great Mother, of creation itself, and when it approaches the masculine consciousness, whether in dream, in physical proximity, or through the subtle planes, it creates a distinct ripple that can awaken dormant spiritual capacities. He described watching this phenomenon unfold in his own life and in the lives of countless individuals whose souls he had read. The masculine, by its nature, tends toward action, toward manifestation in the material world. It builds, it structures, it orders. But without the touch of the feminine, these actions remain rooted in the physical plane alone. It is the feminine energy that whispers to the masculine soul of realms beyond the visible, that calls it to remember its origins in spirit. In a particularly revealing entry, Cayce recorded a vision that came to him not during a reading but in the space between waking and sleeping. I saw souls as spheres of light, and within the male souls were chambers, some illuminated, others in darkness. When the feminine energy, appearing as a luminous flowing presence, moved near these souls, certain chambers would begin to glow. I understood then that each chamber represented capacities for spiritual perception, for compassion, for connection to the divine. The feminine essence does not create these chambers. They exist already within the male soul, but it holds the vibrational key that opens them. Edgar Cayce was especially fascinated by what he termed soul resonance between men and women who shared past life connections. October 3, 1924. When souls have traveled together through multiple incarnations, the feminine energy of one carries the exact vibrational pattern needed to awaken specific spiritual gifts in the other. This is not coincidence, but divine orchestration. What we call attraction in the physical plane is often this soul recognition, this knowing that the other holds keys to our spiritual unfoldment. The manuscript reveals how Cayce came to view relationships not merely as emotional or physical partnerships, but as sacred contracts for spiritual evolution. The most powerful awakening of the male soul often comes through what appears as romantic love, but in truth transcends it. When a man truly opens to the feminine energy, whether embodied in a partner, a friend, a mother, a daughter, he is really opening to an aspect of the divine that he cannot access directly through his own masculine essence. According to these private writings, Cayce believed that each gender carried gifts that the other desperately needed for spiritual completion. The masculine principle, with its focus on individuation and autonomy, often creates separation from source. The feminine principle, with its inherent connection to the rhythms of creation, maintains the lifeline to divine wisdom. When these energies merge, not just physically but energetically, spiritually, both souls expand. In an entry dated February 17, 1925, Cayce explored this dynamic from a more esoteric perspective. The ancient mystery schools understood what we have forgotten, that initiation into higher consciousness required both masculine and feminine energies. The candidate for initiation needed to integrate both within himself. This is why the priestess was as essential as the priest. She carried vibrations that, when properly directed, could awaken dormant spiritual centers in the initiate. Cayce's manuscripts contain detailed observations about what happens energetically when the feminine awakens the masculine. I have observed in countless readings that when the male soul encounters true feminine energy, not distorted by societal expectations or wounded by past traumas, specific centers within his ethereal body begin to activate. The heart center opens first, followed by the third eye, allowing perception beyond the material. Finally, the crown center expands, creating a direct channel to higher dimensions of consciousness. He noted with particular interest how this process differed from purely intellectual or willpower-driven spiritual practices. The masculine approach to spirituality often involves discipline, study, and mental mastery. These are valuable paths, but they can only take the soul so far. There comes a point where further advancement requires surrender, receptivity, intuition, qualities of the feminine essence. Without integrating these, the male seeker hits what appears to be an impenetrable ceiling in his spiritual development. Perhaps most fascinating are Cayce's observations about how feminine energy operates even in the absence of a physical woman. The feminine principle exists as an energetic current available to all souls. Some men can access it directly through meditation, through art, through communion with nature. But for many, the most powerful transmission comes through interaction with a woman who embodies this energy with clarity and power. Edgar Cayce wrote extensively about what he called initiated women, those who consciously carried and directed feminine energy for spiritual purposes. These are not always the most obvious or outwardly spiritual women. Often they are ordinary in appearance, but carry extraordinary frequencies. When such a woman enters a man's life, regardless of the outer nature of their relationship, transformation is inevitable. The masculine soul recognizes, on a level beyond conscious awareness, that it stands in the presence of an energy essential to its completion. In entries spanning 1926 to 1927, Cayce explored the challenges that can block this transmission. The masculine resistance to feminine awakening manifests as control, as intellectual defensiveness, as emotional withdrawal. These are not merely personality traits, but spiritual defense mechanisms. The male soul intuitively knows that to open to the feminine means to surrender control, to acknowledge the limitations of reason alone, to become vulnerable to transformation. This creates fear that must be overcome for awakening to occur. He noted that the process wasn't always gentle. Sometimes the awakening comes through crisis, through heartbreak, through loss, through being brought to one's knees by a relationship. These painful initiations serve to crack open the armored male heart, creating fissures through which feminine wisdom can finally enter. Cayce's manuscripts reveal his belief that this dynamic operates not just individually but collectively. As humanity evolves, we are witnessing the gradual awakening of the collective masculine through its increasing exposure to feminine wisdom. Ancient feminine mysteries, long suppressed, are re-emerging into consciousness. Women are reclaiming their spiritual power. This is not a battle between genders, but a rebalancing that will ultimately lead to the elevation of all souls. In an entry marked "Private, Not for Readings," dated August 12, 1929, Cayce wrote about witness this transformation in himself. I have observed how my own understanding has been shaped and expanded by the feminine presences in my life. My mother first opened my sensitivity to the unseen worlds. My wife, Gertrude, has been the grounding force that allows my consciousness to travel while maintaining connection to the physical plane. The women who come for readings often transmit to me, unknowingly, frequencies that expand my own capacity to access the Akashic field. I am humbled by the recognition that my gift operates not through masculine power alone, but through receptivity, a feminine quality I have had to nurture within myself. Edgar Cayce detailed specific qualities of feminine energy that serve as awakening forces for the masculine soul. The feminine carries the vibration of presence, of being fully in the now moment, undistracted by past or future. When a man encounters this quality in a woman, it calls him out of his tendency to dwell in mental abstractions and into direct experience of the divine in the present. The feminine embodies the wisdom of cycles, of natural rhythms of activity and rest, creation and dissolution. This teaches the masculine soul, so often driven toward constant action, the sacred necessity of fallow periods, of gestation in darkness before new birth. Perhaps most powerfully, Cayce wrote, the feminine carries the vibration of unconditional love, not as an abstract concept, but as a lived reality. When a man truly experiences being loved not for his achievements or strength, but simply for his essence, something profound shifts in his soul. He begins to understand divine love not as something to be earned, but as the very fabric of existence. In entries from the early 1930s, Cayce explored how this awakening manifests in practical terms. The man whose soul has been awakened by feminine energy demonstrates distinct qualities. He maintains his masculine strength, but it is now informed by compassion. He acts decisively, but with awareness of how his actions affect all beings. He thinks clearly, but trusts his intuition equally. He builds in the world but remains connected to Source. He is both warrior and priest, both king and mystic. Cayce's manuscripts suggest that he viewed this awakening as essential, not just for individual spiritual development, but for the healing of society. A civilization dominated by unawakened masculine energy becomes destructive, competitive rather than cooperative, exploitative rather than nurturing, focused on conquest rather than stewardship. The feminine awakens in the masculine soul its capacity for genuine creation, creation that serves life rather than diminishing it. He was careful to distinguish between true feminine energy and its cultural distortions. What awakens the male soul is not the feminine as defined by society, not dependence or weakness or artificial refinement. It is the authentic feminine essence, powerful, wise, magical in its capacity to transform through love. This essence has been as suppressed in women as it has been rejected in men, to the detriment of all souls in their journey toward wholeness. An entry from December 7, 1933, reveals Cayce's prophetic vision. I see a time coming when the masculine and feminine energies will move toward balance, both within individuals and within society. This rebalancing is essential for the next stage of human spiritual evolution. The awakened masculine, illuminated by feminine wisdom, will help create structures that support all life rather than systems that benefit the few at the expense of the many. In his final entries on this subject, dated just a few years before his death, Cayce wrote with a sense of urgency, "The accelerating crises facing humanity, social, environmental, spiritual, cannot be solved by the same consciousness that created them. The masculine principle alone, disconnected from feminine wisdom, has reached the limits of what it can achieve. The great awakening that must now occur is the masculine soul's recognition that it needs the feminine, not as something to control or possess, but as the other half of its own wholeness." Cayce concluded these remarkable private reflections with words that seem to speak directly to our current moment. The feminine energy awakens the masculine soul by reminding it of what it has forgotten, that strength lies in vulnerability, that power flows from surrender, that wisdom comes through listening rather than proclaiming, that true security is found not in walls but in connection. When the masculine embraces these truths, not as abstract concepts, but as lived experience, the soul expansion that follows transforms not just the individual, but ripples outward to heal the world. These words, written by one of history's most documented psychics, remind us that the relationship between masculine and feminine energies is not merely psychological or cultural, but deeply spiritual, a sacred dance orchestrated for our collective evolution. Edgar Cayce, through his unique access to the Akashic records and his lifelong study of the soul's journey, left us this profound understanding of how the divine feminine serves as the awakening force for the masculine spirit, guiding it toward completion. What makes these insights particularly remarkable is that they came through a man born in rural Kentucky in 1877, raised in a traditional Christian environment, far removed from the esoteric traditions that held similar wisdom. Yet somehow, through his extraordinary gift of accessing consciousness beyond the physical plane, Cayce arrived at understandings that ancient mystery schools had preserved and that modern psychology is only beginning to rediscover. In these private manuscripts, we find Cayce wrestling with concepts that transcended the limitations of his era, recognizing that masculine and feminine principles exist independently of biological sex, acknowledging the harm done by suppressing feminine wisdom, and envisioning a future where these energies would move towards sacred balance within individuals and within society. Perhaps most compelling is Cayce's recognition that this awakening is not merely personal, but planetary in its implications. The manuscripts suggest that he viewed the reintegration of feminine wisdom into the collective masculine consciousness as essential for humanity's continued evolution, even for its survival. When the masculine soul fully awakens to the feminine wisdom it has long rejected, he wrote, we will witness a transformation in human affairs as profound as the shift from darkness to light. The sleeping prophet left us many gifts through his thousands of documented readings. But in these private reflections, we find perhaps his most timely message, that the path to healing, both individual and collective, lies in the sacred marriage of masculine and feminine energies, in the awakening that occurs when the divine feminine is finally embraced by the masculine soul that has too long forgotten its own wholeness. As we reflect on these profound insights from Edgar Cayce, we are invited to examine the balance of feminine and masculine energies in our own lives and relationships. How might we facilitate this awakening, both within ourselves and in our interactions with others? What aspects of the feminine wisdom have we perhaps overlooked or undervalued? And how might embracing these qualities transform not just our personal spiritual journey, but our collective future? Thank you for journeying through these revealed manuscripts with us. If these reflections on feminine energy and the masculine soul have resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one and deeply value your insights. Your engagement through likes helps these spiritual truths reach more souls who may benefit from them. Subscribe to our channel to continue exploring the profound wisdom left to us by visionaries like Edgar Cayce. Remember, as Cayce himself wrote in these discovered manuscripts, the soul's greatest journey is from separation to wholeness, from forgetting to remembering, from fear to love.